you so much, and thank you for inviting us. Yes, our topic of the day is Aspen in buildings, from tradition into the future. This is a topic we've been working on in a project, and to get you started and to give you the background and context to this, we will start by telling you some about where we come from and our ideas about craft research. Yes, I'm the head of the National Center for Heritage Safeguarding Crafts. It's a part of the Department of Conservation at the University of Gothenburg. And we are situated 2 hours north of Gothenburg. We train traditional gardeners in bachelor programs, traditional log builders and masoners in bachelor programs, and we also have a master's program and PhD programs in craft. And we mark a difference in craft and about craft. So this is important for us. We do it in craft. And you can see from the pictures examples of training going on. But the National Center also has a broader task in society. And it's kind of two sides of a coin. We develop skills and knowledge needed to safeguard heritage buildings and sites for the sustainable use in the future. But we also work with support to developing and also sustaining craft skills as intangible heritage in itself, without the buildings and gardens, so to speak. And since we have a building stock that almost represents 1,000 years of building in Sweden, of course many of them are built in traditions that it's no longer alive. But we still need to uphold them. We still need to safeguard them. And therefore the craftsman working on them needs another set of skills, another set of competences. But since craft is not an ancient discipline in the university, our critical mass and what we want to research and develop is not within the academies. Therefore, the craft laboratory bridges the outside world and the craftsmen in practice with the academic world. And it's a challenge, I could say. I often say I'm an interpreter rather than an academic. But here you see our laboratories. We want to work with craftspeople employed or working with projects on historical sites. And on a regular basis, their work is to make a new plaster or put tar on a roof or plant plants. But in every of those projects or processes, there are questions being identified and solved in quiet. But what the craft laboratory wants to do is to take them into the more regular research in the academic field. And up until today, we have had 8 dissertations and several of masters, uppsatser, essays, that you can find on our webpage on open access, all of them. And some of the dissertations are in English. Yes, and we also have a board consisting of all the larger representatives of owners of listed buildings and sites in Sweden. And most of them are also funding our projects, not all of them, not the associations. And we also offer, you could say, a scholarship for craftspeople who don't have the formal right to enter the academic world. 2 persons a year can apply for this scholarship, and they get funded for 3 months to document or to develop something that they have an interest in or know about, and that they want to put out there for the rest of the world to learn or to see. And there have been a broad scope of examples, and some of them you see in the pictures here. And we also do lots of workshops and seminars and courses for professionals. This is a picture from a seminar, a carpenter's seminar, where the carpenters they all brought a door that was constructed or made by hand tools in a manner that they could not understand. And then they together deconstructed the door and tried to make the tools needed, the planes needed to make a copy of the door. And this is something that we do regularly, often with the craftspeople from the Norwegian academic world. And of course, if you want to communicate or mediate craft knowledge or craft research, the film media is a much better tool than the written word. And therefore, we also try to challenge the traditional formats for publication in the academic field. And therefore, we also developed a conference where we take multimodal contributions that could be exhibitions or films or 3D models, etc., etc. And I will show you. It will take place in 3 weeks, actually, the second one, so you're very welcome. And we also offer courses to learn this skill of making films. So if you are a craftsman, we also offer you support to do that. And we have a YouTube channel, which is maybe not a traditional way to communicate academic research, but it's a very important tool to get input and to get outreach for us. Okay, Kalle?
Yes. Is it on? Yeah. Now I will talk about craft research and how we use it. Before we get into Aspen, that is the main topic here, we will give some examples from another reconstruction project. Södervårda Church was built in 1310 around, and it was burned down in 2001, and it was decided it should be built up, but the focus would be to research about the lost embedded craft in this building, so we better could preserve and understand the extant medieval buildings. And in this reconstruction there were multiple aims. For us, the main aim was not to reconstruct the building, but to reconstruct the craft embedded in a building or in the 14th century. And there also was an aim to transfer this knowledge and traditional craft knowledge as well. And for the people who lived in the village, the main aim was they wanted a building back. So for them, they saw it as we reconstructed a lost building, but we didn't see it like that. And to do this, we had to choose our primary sources, and our primary sources after a while was medieval constructions, medieval written descriptions, medieval illustrations and tools, and not our traditional craft knowledge, because there's a long way between the 14th century and today. So we really low-ranked our own prejudgments and natural science and so on after a while. So as a craft researcher, we had to see ourselves as apprentices and not as masters in our craft. So we had to relearn a lot. We had to deconstruct our ideas and our perspectives. And even if this was what we wanted to do, it was very necessary to do transdisciplinary research and also use modern science and so on to know some of the things. But if there was a contradiction between modern ideas and medieval ideas, we thought the medieval ideas were correct and we were wrong, so we could learn about what we did. So I illustrated it a bit like this, that in the beginning, we were researchers here. We thought ourselves was masters and looking down and judging and interpreting the medieval things. But in the end, we were apprentices in the middle context of the medieval times, patron perspectives from the medieval times, carpentry from other parts of Europe and so on. So we really made a journey with this. And this I will talk with Denise later. We also, in the beginning, we made a copy. We used meter, we just copied things, and that was really shitty. So then when we got into the medieval thinking, we started to use constructive geometry to understand things and not saying, they were really bad in this and they couldn't use the meter system and so on. So we had to be humble. And here's a little video when we're doing elaboration, an experiment. So it's actually not from the reconstruction of Symmetry, but it couldn't have been done without the reconstruction, because when we had the aim here to make 30-meter long rafters, and nobody had done that since the 14th century, and we had one chance to do this experiment, one tree, and it was filmed, so if we would fail, we really would be documented failing. But we were not accustomed to fail, so we did our best, and we had to work in a flow. So we couldn't document ourselves, because if we do things when it's critical, we can't take a step beside and take a photo. You have to work in a flow. And 30-meter long is very long, so, and it's still like spaghetti, the rafters. And we also learned by coincidence how you can take out a very big pine tree from the forest without any machines, without any horses or oxes or anything. It's just to carry it out. And 30 meters is long, as I said. But doing this, working like an apprentice in a humble way, you learn a lot instead of just thinking you know the answers before you start. Another thing in this reconstruction, we used the traditional modern way of making shingles. So we made them of hard pine core. And in the 20th century, this is called core pine, but as you can see, it's 50% not core. So again, the traditional way to do it was really shitty if you used modern traditions. So after 7 years, it was very rotten, so we had to change it. We had cleaned everything with axes and wedges and done it very top of the art, as we thought, but it didn't work. And here is my colleague Börje Samuelsson. He's a master shingle maker. And when we learned that we have to use 100% pine core, he cleaved about 5,000 shingles for another project using only hand tools. And 5,000 is quite a lot, but he's a master, so it was no problem for him. And then we held courses with the craft laboratory to share this knowledge of how to make shingles in a reclaimed traditional way. But there's still a problem to do it like this way, because very big pine trees is very rare in Sweden, and a solution for a few years was to import very big pine trees from Russia, and it's not working out anymore, obvious. And it wasn't good then anyway, because it's much better to use local material. So, and this was one of the reasons of the current project. But here is from Södra again, where we put the shingles on the roof. All these shingles, all the boards are made with axe and wedges. Aspen wedges, by the way, because they are incredibly strong to use. And so 6-meter boards, here it's of pine and spruce, and the shingles are mostly of pine, but some of oak. But again, pine is hard to get, so then we come to the current project.
Yes, we focused a bit on the pine here in the Södra project, but actually the rottening pine shingles on Södra is not only the case on that roof. It's the case of several, almost very many of the Swedish church roofs are made of this quite bad pine since the 1990s. And also, since the last 150 years, we have not been producing the kind of forest that we need to get the timber that you see on top there. That's 220-year-old pines, what we call fir. And this is a problem. If you are aware of the ICOMOS principles for the conservation of wooden buildings, all of us in the countries having wooden heritage should have historic forest preserves to be able to maintain and uphold our heritage. We don't in Sweden, but we are lucky. Sweden is, the Swedish church is the 5th largest owner of forests in Sweden. And they also maintain the churches, of course. So, but still, if you're going to grow trees that are 220 years old, you need time. And their roofs are rotten right now. So what we are trying to do in a new project that is founded by the Church of Sweden is to investigate and research alternative tree species for this use. And to the right you see an aspen. And that's an interesting tree, and not used at all today in Sweden.
And the Natural Heritage Board in Sweden wrote a guideline in 1981, and they stated that pine like this with a lot of sapwood is the shit, and that it was the most common, and in very, very rare cases it could be oak. So we really questioned this because it didn't seem right. So we have started to make a spreading sheet. All these dots are churches that we know or aware about that have or used to have oaken shingles. So it's quite a lot, so they for sure was wrong. And we also here investigate findings of Aspen. So far in Sweden we only have one actual church that we are sure did have Aspen shingles. So the other examples in Sweden are from wall boards from the 11th century to the 15th century in churches. Roofing boards like this one, this is pine, but the same, they are clean and so on. And in Finland and Russia and Åland, there are many examples of still extant churches with aspen shingles. And here is the church in Gothenburg, where there is a built-in roof with aspen shingles mixed with oak shingles. And this is aspen boards from the 15th century. And here is a log timber building. Would you like to say something about that?
No, it's we are expecting in the afternoon we will know the age of that building. But you can see it's a combination of old timber and new timber, and the new timber pointed at in the picture is an aspen log.
And with new, it could be 1900 or 1850 or something, we don't know.
No,
So
it's a work in progress. Yeah. And this is examples of existing aspen hole coverings from Åland. And it's a medieval church. And Åland is today part of Finland, but when this church was built, it was a part of Sweden. So this is very interesting for our project, because we really need to find alternative species for the churches of Sweden, because otherwise the roofs will be, the materials on the roofs will be changed due to lack of alternatives, and that would be very, very sad, and it would also be difficult to change back into wooden roofs if they had gotten, for example, slate roofs or other ones. So these historic findings are, of course, our primary source so far, but we also have written sources, historic written sources, where aspen is pointed out to be a durable material. And this is an example of an historic description.
And we found also from other ages, so this is from 1779, and Fischerström writes how good aspen is to use, and there's a lot more here written that you can harvest it when it's only 20 years old, and it's very durable and so on. And then from the 1880s, I think, there's another architect writing about aspen and saying it should be used much more, and he speaks of all the qualities, but the tradition to use pine has been so hard to get over, I guess, so now we will try again.
And from our perspective, we did expect to find roof coverings and boards of aspen, because that is known still in living traditions, especially those thin shaved slates. What we didn't expect to find is aspen in structural function, but that has also been found during the last year, and this is extra interesting, we think. And then our third source is, of course, tradition barriers, tradition carriers, and to the right you see Lars Berg, who is producing these shaved shingles from aspen.
Yeah, and this is not like the thick ones, it's thin ones like this that you shave. But into the 1960s, 70s, he made these not as something picturesque, but to sell to people to have on the roof. And his father learned him that aspen was the best thing to use. And when I was working on a listed building, he made the shingles like that for me. And when he showed me the tree, it was like 20 years old, very, very big, earrings and core rot, and I thought, this is not good. But then I was back there 12 years later, and there also was very good spruce shaven shingles, and they had rot infestation on many parts as expected, and the aspen had none.
So now we are starting to work this aspen wood. This summer, this tree was cleaved and hewn into boards, as you saw before in the film clips. We also started to hew the thicker kind of shingles, and next summer we will, together with the parish in Sjösås and Växjö, we will change that roof into aspen oak roof to get surfaces in Sweden to show that this can be used again. And by telling you about this project, we also want to open up, because as you saw on our spreadsheet, we know that there are Aspen traditions in Europe, and we know that the national borders didn't look like they do nowadays when the churches we have were built. So if you know about projects or houses or tradition barriers in your countries working in Aspen, we are really keen on getting to know them, because there are several of aspects of quality, when to fell your trees, how to process your material, etc., that we are not aware of. Okay, so we have 2 days, or no, we have more, 3, 4 days. Please talk to us. And this is the conference I mentioned earlier, the Biennial International Conference for the Craft Sciences. Welcome to visit the webpage and read the program and make a contribution next time, but you can participate later on in September.
And to sum up, I think for us it's really important to use the old sources as primary sources to learn from the past, and then maybe transform it a bit, and maybe not use just axe, but maybe use saws and so on. So we want to learn from the past, not judge the past and invent something new. That's important. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.